Okay, so here we are live once again. I just had a very frustrating experience at the DMV where I went in there and there was like this huge line because apparently the computer systems had been down and standing in the line. And then when I get like most of the way through the line, then the lady doesn't announce it. Make sure you have a confirmation number ready. You should go to the computers over at the side and fill this out before you get in the line. And there's not like a sign up that tells you that. There's nobody there to tell you that. Is like nothing. How am I supposed to know this? I haven't been in a DMV. I haven't had reason to set foot in a DMV in like 8 years. Last time I renewed my driver's license. So even if that was the way that they did it back then, I wouldn't remember. Why would I remember? So it was just like incompetently run. I got frustrated. I came home. I just did what I needed to do on the computer. Like, I'm not going to get into why I decided to go to the office and do it in the first place, because basically it was just one of those things where, like, I had to do multiple things at once, and I figured it'd just be easy to just go ahead and do them all at once while I was there. But I could just renew my driver's license online, which was the main thing I needed to do. So I just took care of that at the time. So anyway, here we go with another Mcfarlane DC Multiverse unboxing. This is a Mcfarlane Collector's Edition, which you know what that means. That means it's overpriced. But I was lucky. I was able to get this one actually on Amazon as part of their warehouse deals. It was one that was in a damaged package. So I got it for about $10 off, i.e. I got it for the price that, most of these figures probably should have been in the first place. Honestly, I kind of feel like this might be one that might justify the extra price tag, though, since, he does have those wings, and that does take up a lot of space in the box. And, maybe that one's kind of justified. Maybe. It's kind of weird with some of these, like I feel like the Return of Superman figure, that one justified the cost because it had crypto in there, so I added an extra figure. But some of these, like first appearance Superman and Alan Scott Green Lantern and Sinestro, like, to me, all of those could have just been like regular figures. There was nothing really. I mean, they're nice figures, but there was nothing really that outstanding about them that I felt like justified the price increase. This, at least, like, he's got wings. That's some extra articulation. It's going to take up more space in the box. It's going to make him look impressive on my shelf. So I'm not going to complain too much about him being overpriced, especially since I wound up getting him for the price of a regular figure anyway. So that was nice. Here's a picture of him on the back. Some artwork by David Finch. You can see the Amazon sticker on here that says, "Thanks to you, this product is a second life." Well, yeah. Thanks to you, I saved $10. So, and you can see like they described what the damage was to the top, and you can see it's minimal. I wouldn't even know if I wasn't looking for it. There's like a little bit of some scoring right here, and you can maybe see even on the camera there's like a little bit of a dent. And for whatever reason, there's like a little piece of like tissue paper or something stuck underneath the sticker on this side. So it's stuff that I wouldn't even notice. Maybe the tissue paper I might have noticed, but none of this other stuff would I have noticed if I hadn't been looking for it. Now I cut the X-Acto. You saw me with the X-Acto knife cutting the tape at the bottom here. So let's go ahead and open them up. So this piece of artwork on the back by David Finch. This is not actually the costume that he's wearing in this figure, but I guess they figured, you can't see enough of it to really tell that this is, look at the side, it even says, a Hawkman from 0 Hour. This was one of their attempts to reboot Hawkman. Let's have a brief history of Hawkman real quick, shall we? It's totally the sort of thing I do on this channel, where let's just talk about the history of the character as we go through all this. So, you can see the wings are actually on a separate piece. Or on the back on the same bubble as the figure stand. So Hawkman, of course, was a Golden Age character. He was first introduced in Flash Comics #1. Flash Comics was not named after the character the Flash, actually. That's a coincidence. and him and Flash were the two main co-stars. By which I mean that like they alternated cover appearances on Flash comics, which is what I mean when I say Flash wasn't actually the main character. If anything, like Flash comics, like the Flash would have been named after Flash comics rather than the other way around. The funny thing is I actually just the other day saw an advertisement in an old comic book. I guess it would have been an issue of Detective Comics or More Fun Comics or something like that, that was advertising the first issue of Action Comics. And the at the top of it, there was a blurb that said Flash, like the way a news announcer would have an announcement of news. They would say Flash, hot off the press, that kind of thing. And it looked exactly like, the logo that eventually would become the logo of Flash Comics. So I'm guessing when they did that design, they were like, hey, Flash Comics would actually be a really cool name for a comic book. We should do that. Anyway, so Hawkman wound up becoming a fairly popular character, not quite as popular as his co-star, the Flash, or his contemporary Green Lantern. Certainly not as much as the big three, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. But he was still fairly popular and retained as the co-headliner of Flash Comics with the Flash for, I believe, the extent of the run. And then the Flash would have been the original chairman of the Justice Society of America, probably because he was the most popular character of the original JSA crew. And the original idea behind the Justice Society was that it would be a place to put all the characters that didn't have an extra place to show off all the characters that didn't have their own book. So that's why Superman and Batman weren't members of the Justice Society initially, because they already had their own comic book. So they didn't really need to be in the Justice Society. Wonder Woman was put in the Justice Society even though she had her own comic book, because she was the new hotness at the time, the new hit character they just debuted, and they wanted to make sure that they were pushing her as hard as possible. And even then, for a lot of those issues, she wasn't an active member. She was the secretary. So kind of sexist from our modern perspective. But really the main thing was they didn't want to they wanted to show her off, but they didn't want to have her be part of the main group because she already had her own book. So Superman and Batman were honorary members of the Justice Society because they already had their own book. They didn't need to be in the actual team. So when the Flash got his own book, which was entitled All Flash Quarterly, because it came out 4 times a year, and All Flash because they didn't want to confuse it with Flash Comics, Green Lantern then became the chairman of the Justice Society. And shortly thereafter, he got his own book, so he had to leave the team as well. So then the next biggest character that they had that did not have their own book was Hawkman. And I guess Hawkman, like, even though he was pretty popular, he just wasn't quite popular enough they felt like they could justify giving him his own book. So he became the chairman of the Justice Society for the remainder of the Golden Age run, because he never got his own book. So that is like probably the most important thing about Hawkman as far as the Golden Age goes, is that he was the chairman of the longest serving chairman of the Justice Society. So moving on, superheroes fell out of favor after World War II had ended, and a lot of those characters were like very tied in with World War II and the war itself and the politics of the time. So I guess they were kind of considered old hat. The new hotness became horror comics, and EC Comics led the charge. And eventually just superheroes kind of fell by the wayside. And kind of the last stand of the Golden Age heroes was they wound up getting all collapsed back into All-Star Comics. So Flash and Green Lantern rejoined the Justice Society. Hawkman retained as the chairman, though. He wasn't giving up that seat. And it remained that way until, I guess, the early part of the 1950s was when that ended. You think there would have been like a big gap between these characters, but there actually wasn't. You know, it was just a few years between that last issue of All-Star and the first appearance of Barry Allen in 1956. But it was still long enough that, you know, there was enough of a turnover of the readership. Back then, comics were just for kids. That they could introduce brand new members or brand new versions of these classic superheroes. So Flash was completely revamped. Instead of college athlete Jay Garrick, the Flash was now police scientist Barry Allen. Instead of radio announcer Alan Scott, Green Lantern was now test pilot Hal Jordan. And instead of being, you know, millionaire and museum curator Carter Hall, Hawkman was reintroduced as a millionaire and museum curator Carter Hall. I don't know why exactly, but for whatever reason, Julie Schwartz did not feel the need to update Hawkman as strongly as he did the other characters. He and Hawkgirl were still wearing basically the same costumes, had basically the same powers, were still fighting the evils of the present with the weapons of the past. You see, this Hawkman comes with a mace, as every Hawkman figure should come with a mace. I'm going to set that aside for the moment. But that does not mean that they did not update Hawkman at all. In the original origin of Hawkman, Hawkman was a reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian. Hello, MHD, how are you doing today? So we're opening up this Hawkman. I'm talking about the history of the character right now. So instead of being a reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian prince, now Hawkman and Hawkgirl, you have this one, but still in the box. Yeah, I took him out of the box, obviously. So, so yeah, Hawkman and Hawkgirl, instead of being the reincarnations of this ancient Egyptian prince and the woman he was in love with, were now police officers from another planet, the planet Thanagar. And they had come to Earth in pursuit of a shape-shifting criminal. And once they caught him, they decided to hang around for a little bit. They had, you know, established new identities as museum curator Carter Hall and his wife Shayera. They were able to learn everything that they knew about their planet with their Thanagarian technology. They had like a helmet they put on their heads. I forget the name of it. I'm drawing a blank on it. But it was able to basically teach them everything about Earth, all the languages and everything. So Carter Hall, or Qatar Hall, as his actual Thanagarian name was, he basically knew probably more about archaeology than anybody on Earth did, just because like he had all the information from that computer kind of downloaded into his brain. So, but he still basically had the same uniform. They put like a little hawk head insignia on the red circle inside his chest. You can see it here. It retained through subsequent versions of the character. And that was the way it was for a while. You had an Earth 2 Hawkman that was the original Golden Age version, and you had the Earth 1 Hawkman that was the new version with the alien origin. So we flash forward to the Crisis on Infinite Earths. And right after Crisis, Hawkman had a series that was going at the time. He'd had a miniseries called Shadow War of Hawkman, and then a regular series that spun off of that, because I suppose Shadow War of Hawkman was a successful enough series. They spun it off into a new ongoing series of Hawkmen. I skipped over some stuff. Hawkman had his own series in the 1960s. Didn't last too long, unfortunately. I guess another thing where he was popular enough to keep the character around, but not quite popular enough to keep his own series going around. It changed it to Atom and Hawkman and teamed them up with the Atom so they could keep both of those characters going for a little bit. And then Hawkman had ongoing adventures in World's Finest Comics in the 1970s. Those would have been the first Hawkman comics I ever would have read. And then we'll go back to Crisis on Infinite Earths. They did Shadow War of Hawkman around that same time, and then he had his own ongoing series. I remember there was an issue of Action Comics, which was a team-up title at the time, where Hawkman teamed up with Superman. They decided just to kind of not do much to revamp Hawkman until Tim Truman did his Hawkworld Prestige format series in the late 1980s and revamped the origin of the character. Now, according to Tim Truman, this was not supposed to be taking place in the modern day. This was not supposed to overwrite everything that had come before. It was supposed to take place before any of Hawkman's post-crisis appearances. It was supposed to be the same character. They were just kind of retooling the origin a little bit. But I guess because the title was so popular, they decided they had to, revamp and start from scratch. So they did a Hawkworld series that picked up right where the ongoing series picked up right exactly where the Prestige format series left off. It took place in the current day, and Kadar Hall and Shayera Hall, what was her last name in that? They were both had just arrived on Earth, and the characters before were not them. So they had to come up with an explanation as to who this other Hawkman and Hawkgirl was. So at the time, the idea was, we'll just say that was the Golden Age versions, and they just joined the Justice League, and they were in the Justice League that whole time. But then readers were like, well, wait a minute, they had all this Thanagarian tech. How did they get all this Thanagarian tech? Okay, so there was a second Hawkman in between Carter Hall and Qatar Hall, who is now the third Hawkman. I don't remember that character's name, but he was a spy that had infiltrated Earth culture and, was a Thanagarian spy trying to get information on Earth. And when Thanagarians invaded Earth, they used that information. So if you're wondering where that Hawkgirl storyline came from in the Justice League animated show, that's it. So Hawkman's continuity was a just complete mess, a complete shambles. And when they got to 0 Hour, they decided to reboot Hawkman again to try to clean it up. And they wound up just making an even bigger mess of the whole thing. But they redesigned his costume and made him look a little more 90s. And that's why he's got these dark grayish blue pants, which I believe are actually supposed to be black in the comic. Because, it's the 90s. We want our superheroes to wear black. But every time I've seen an action figure of him, and the only other one I can remember is Total Justice. But that one and this one, they both colored his pants kind of more of a bluish gray. I don't know. I think it would look better green, personally. Do like a dark green with maybe brown boots if you think the red boots are a little too outrageous these days. He doesn't really have to have trunks, I guess, if you don't want to give him trunks. But green would have worked better, I think, because it's a more traditional Hawkman color. And indeed, they did do a chase version of this figure where he's wearing the classic Hawkman colors with the red trunks, red boots, green pants. Very brightly colored, like ridiculously brightly colored. And I hope I can find one of those for a good price, because I would like to have that figure. It's a little cartoonish, but I do like it. So anyway, like I said, 0 Hour made an even bigger mess of Hawkman, and DC decided to just kind of bury the character for the time being. And for a while, there was just a moratorium on Hawkman. People weren't allowed to use Hawkman. Grant Morrison wanted to bring back make a whole new. I think he just wanted to bring back Hawkman at first for his Justice League of America, and they wouldn't let him bring back Hawkman. So he just made up his own version of Hawkman, completely divorced from the original, which was an angel who was living among men, and his real name was Zoriel. And they wouldn't let him use the Hawkman name because they just editorial about to ask him. Yeah, I haven't seen the recolor in person yet, so I will buy it if I see it and I have the money, because I do like those classic colors. But even if as bright and obnoxious as they made them, like, it's just, you could tell somebody at the front was like, oh, you want classic colored Hawkman? You want Hawkman color like an old comic book? Well, here you go, Chief. There's your bright colored Hawkman. So, but yeah, Hawkman had such a stink around, they wouldn't let Grant Morrison use the name, so he just continued to call that character Zoriel. And Hawkman was not brought back until Jeff Johns was writing Justice Society of America, and this time they got it right. So they brought back Hawkman and basically said, okay, every version of Hawkman you've ever seen, that was the same guy. He was reincarnated all these different times. Well, how come one was alive at the same time as the other? Let's not get into that. He's always a reincarnation. There, done. That explains everything. And I think by that point, people had just missed Hawkman enough. They just didn't care and didn't complain. And Jeff Johns was a writer who I think really got Hawkman because he basically wrote him as like Conan with wings. And that's what the character always should have been. Like I said before, fighting the evils of the present with the weapons of the past. So here he is out of the package. Took long enough to get to that. I've been talking for like 20 minutes about the history of this character, but it's stuff I felt like I needed to go over to give you some context. You know, like I probably could have just said, this is 90s Hawkman and just moved on, but that's not how I roll. So there's the figure out of the package. And we got a couple more things we got to get out of the package because we got his wings, obviously. So let's go ahead and get the wings out of there. And they're held in there with these two big old double rubber tabs, but since the wings are kind of concave, I was able to cut them rather easily. So there's the wings out of the package. You can see he's going to have a pretty impressive wingspan. That's why I kind of feel like this character at least somewhat, slightly justifies the price increase. And then we can get the figure stand off. Every figure should come with a figure stand, and Mcfarlane is usually pretty good about it. Not always, but usually pretty good about it. They superpowers could use some figure stands. I'm just saying, Todd, if you're listening. So here's a figure stand, and like with the other collector edition series, you can see that it has a silver logo rather than the black embossed logo that the standard Multiverse figures have. And unfortunately, Hawkman does not come with a flight stand. And that disappoints me greatly, because if ever a character should come with a flight stand, it's Hawkman. And you've already made this figure $10 more expensive than your standard Mcfarlane Multiverse figure, so why didn't you give him a flight stand? Just give him a flight stand. That's not too much to ask for, considering how we're paying a premium price for this character, is it? I don't think so. So anyway, let's go ahead and assemble our Hawkman, because we got to stick these wings onto his back. So make sure we got the right one facing the right way. So here we go. We got that on there. And I want to be kind of delicate about it, because I don't want to take a chance on breaking anything. His wings are on the kind of standard Mcfarlane ball joint, and there is kind of a ratcheting to it. But I don't want to take a chance on like twisting it off or something like that. So, and it's a much thicker peg, but I'm kind of worried about breaking it like in the middle of the joint. You know what I mean? And then we can just kind of plug these in. The hole is really tight. That's what she said. And I think I got this one in. All right, so there we go. And Hawkman does indeed have a pretty impressive wingspan. We can swing the wings back about that far and swing them forward about that far. And in theory, they rotate all the way around. But like I said, I'm being kind of delicate with these joints, because I don't want to snap that ball joint in the middle, because I can see where it's kind of trying to pry itself loose. But I figure once the plastic loosens up enough, once it gets used to having those pegs in there, it'll be a little bit easier to move him around. So I'm going to put his wings all the way back, because I think that will help with going over the articulation on this figure. So the head does rotate all the way around. It is slightly hindered by all this long hair that he has. It was the 90s. They like to give characters long hair. So he does not look up very far, again, because of the long hair. It does kind of hinder that. So that is unfortunate. He looks down about that far. So if he had a flight stand, you could have him hovering over the other characters and kind of looking down at them. So he does have the butterfly joints. His arms move up about that far since I decided to go ahead and pose him like that anyway. I felt like that just worked for the pose. So the arms rotate all the way around. They're going to kind of bump into the wings a little bit, but that's to be expected. But they do rotate all the way around. Like I said, they go up about that far. There is a bicep swivel. The bicep rotates all the way around. We have a double jointed elbow. And this one seems kind of stuck at the top part of the elbow. But I managed to get it loose. Just a little bit coaxing. And his arm popped out. Don't worry, it didn't break. It just popped out. It's just the peg. We can see here, the peg popped out. Hopefully I can just pop that back in. It probably just wasn't put on all the way at the factory, and that's probably why it popped out. It probably just, they just probably weren't able to get it on all the way for whatever reason. And it's probably going to pop out again, to be quite honest. So later on, once this video is over, I'm going to hit his shoulder with a hairdryer and see if I can get that peg to pop in a little better. It is interesting to me, now that I see it off, is that the peg is on the inside of the bicep rather than on the outside of the shoulder. So that's an interesting way to do that. So yeah, bicep swivels all the way around, elbow joint bends, and I did not expect it to pop out, so we were right there in the middle of that. He's got a double jointed elbow, but like I said, that one seems to be kind of sticking a little bit. Even with it just being that one joint that I bent, you can see that it's got like a really good range of motion at the elbow. Let's try it with his left arm and see if we have any better luck. And his arm popped out over there too. I'm going to examine this a little bit while I've got it out, and it looks to me like this peg is actually, I think it might be a separate piece that plugs into both the shoulder and the bicep. So that's interesting. You know what? While I've got it off, I'm just going to go ahead and try to get that. It might be easier to do it this way, since it seems to want to pop off anyway. But that is a really tough joint. I'm just going to have to do the whole thing with a hairdryer and loosen everything up. I think that's what I'm going to have to do. But I will do that after the episode, because we know I don't like to use the hairdryer during the show if I can avoid it. So he's got the butterfly joints, and the arms move forward about that far, move backward about that far. And it seems to me like kind of like with Batfleck is like these aren't fitting quite as deeply into the sockets as they usually do. So you want to be kind of careful when you pose them that they don't pop out of the socket too much, because that might make it a little more difficult to pose. He does have the cool Mcfarlane torso articulation, so we can move him about at the torso however we want. He's got the cool Mcfarlane wrist joints with the ball joints. I just popped his arm off again. The unfortunate thing about this one, though, is for whatever reason, they decided to color the wrist joint in their flesh colored. And that's weird, because then it's like, instead of having just like a big long gauntlet there, he's got like a short little glove and a wristband. And it's like, that's the kind of plastic that don't take the paint really well. They really should have just molded that in the blue color plastic. And I was trying to shove the gauntlet at least up on his forearm somewhat, but it seems like it's actually glued on. Or it might even be molded on. That might just be painted. I thought it would have been a separate piece, but I don't think it is now that I think about it. So no such problem with the right hand, where he has the shorter glove, and you can see that the end of the glove just comes right before the ball joint, so we don't have to worry about that. Over here, does not have an extra hand, so you're not going to be able to get him into a double-handed grip with the mace, unfortunately. And he does not come with the bladed weapon that Hawkman used a lot in the 90s, so that's kind of disappointing. I would have liked to have seen him come with that bladed weapon that he used a lot in the 90s. But here he is with the mace. You can see he holds the mace quite well. It fits quite snugly into his hand. And it is a little warped. It was a little warped right out of the package. But I figure I can probably fix that with a hairdryer. That's not that big a deal. but we can get him into some cool poses with the mace. There we go. Flying down and bashing the hell out of criminals. So that's pretty cool. The Tim Truman Hawkworld miniseries was really good. And if you haven't read it, if you care about Hawkman at all, if he's a character that interests you, that tickles your fancy, and you haven't read Tim Truman's Hawkworld, I seriously suggest you read it. I have not read too much of the Baxter Edition series that followed it immediately. I do know that that's where Graham Nolan got his start, and later on he would draw Detective Comics and be one of my favorite Batman artists of the time. I really like this stuff. So the leg kicks up about that far. He does have the double jointed knees. They bend about that far. There's no boot cut, but he does have the cool Mcfarlane ball jointed ankles, so you can still turn his ankle any which way you want. Ankle bends down about that far. Ankle bends up about that far. And then he has toe articulation because they want to show off. So there we go with that. He does actually have a little loop here on his belt. Oh, yeah, you definitely should. It's a great comic. There we go. It's probably one of the best Hawkman comics that I've ever read. My personal favorite Hawkman comics are still the stuff that Joe Kubert did in the Silver Age. As far as I'm concerned, never has anybody drawn Hawkman better than Joe Kubert. Joe Kubert is the man. His Hawkman is just like he didn't draw a whole lot of superheroes. He mostly was famous for doing Sergeant Rock and various like Tor was a character that he created who was like a caveman type character. He did Viking Prince and stuff like that. Didn't do a whole lot of superheroes, Joe Kubert, but he did do Hawkman, and Hawkman is the probably the superhero that would have fit his style the best. And he was able to give it like a really good, gritty, tough kind of look to it. And like I said, Hawkman basically should be Conan with wings, and that's what Joe Kubert gave us. And Tim Truman's artwork, it has like obviously Kubert was like a big influence on him. I believe he actually went to the Joe Kubert school and studied under the man. But Kubert was a big influence on his work. And just Tim Truman on Hawkman was like unnatural. And he came in and basically did like Hawkworld is kind of like to Hawkman, and I say this with no hyperbole. It's like the closest thing that Hawkman has to like, Batman has the Dark Knight Returns, and Green Arrow has the Longbow Hunters, and Superman, I would say his is probably Kingdom Come, and Green Lantern, it would be the New Frontier, where like, just some visionary will come onto it and be like, this is my vision of the character, and give you like a sort of definitive take on the character that does define the character for years to come. And for Hawkman, I kind of feel like Hawkworld was that. So you get that every once in a while with some of these DC heroes, like, and that's pretty cool. So let me put the mace back in his hand. Usually I read the trading card first before I do anything else, but I did not in this case. And we're going to go ahead and do that right now. And I'm looking at the trading card, and I notice a misprint on it, which we'll see in a second. Let me get this out of here. This is really tight. A lot tighter than these usually are. All right, so we got out. And we got the same image of Hawkman. Yes, it is a must-have. Maybe you can find a copy for a good price. I know I got mine years ago, and I was finding copies of it in a quarter bin, which is a crime. So we got the same piece of artwork here by David Finch. Very nice piece of artwork. It says Mcfarlane Collector's Edition. And then we can see here's what the back of the card looks like, and it says Abyss, Batman versus Abyss. And what? Abyss? Batman versus Abyss? This is Hawkman. Why does it say Batman versus Abyss? How do you make that mistake? Embarrassing. That's what that is. Somebody got fired over that. So let's go ahead and read the bio on the back. And it says, data file, real name Carter Hall. Carter Hall has lived many lives. While he was an while he is an archaeologist and the superhero Hawkman in the present, in the past he has been an Egyptian prince, a medieval knight, a Wild West gun hand, and a Thanagarian soldier. A hero in every generation, Carter both studies and lives history. But they didn't get my favorite phrase on there with Hawkman, did they? Fighting the evils of the present with the weapons of the past. Man, another Hawkman comic I would greatly recommend for anybody interested in the character. And it's not like a Hawkman solo comic, but there was an issue of Justice League of America where I was really impressed with the character. I think this is probably where I fell in love with the character. And of course, it was a segment drawn by Joe Kubert, because like I said, Joe Kubert is the man when it comes to Hawkman. When it comes to a lot of things, but especially for Hawkman. Unknown Soldier, that was another thing that Kubert drew that I really liked. He did the covers, at least. I'm sure he did some issues. I remember Nestor Redondo did a lot of issues of that too, and he's like he's like the next best thing to Kubert as far as like DC's war titles go. But yeah, so in Justice League of America number 200, there was a storyline in which the 7 founding members of the Justice League had been kind of hypnotized by the Appalax meteors that were in the first. The Appalax aliens were the villains in the original origin of the Justice League. So it mesmerized all of the founding members to come back and get the meteors for some nefarious purpose. So all the characters that had joined the Justice League in the intervening years, everybody from Green Arrow, who was the first member to join the Justice League after it was founded, all the way to the most recent member, Firestorm, had to battle a member of the founding Justice League and try to get them from getting a piece of the meteor. And like Firestorm fought the Martian Manhunter, and Green Arrow and Black Canary teamed up against Batman, and Zatanna went up against Wonder Woman, and Red Tornado went up against Aquaman, and who was it who went up against the Flash? Elongated Man? Yeah, it was Elongated Man. That would make sense because, they had a history together. And I guess Hawkman just drew the short straw because Hawkman had to go up against Superman. And there's just this great moment with him just pulling out this arsenal of all these ancient weapons like nets and like gladiator nets and his flanged mace and one of those spiked gloves like the gladiators would have in the arena, and he goes off after Superman, and he's just thinking to himself, I don't stand a chance against Superman, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. And indeed, when he goes up against Superman, he is soundly defeated. But it's not like he just rolled over and played dead. He went up against somebody that he knew he didn't have a chance in hell of beating, and he was soundly defeated. But he still gave it his best. He still put 100% into that battle versus Superman, and that gave me a lot of respect for Hawkman as a character. I got to tell you. So yeah, like I've been a huge fan of Hawkman ever since. A lot of great comics about this guy, definitely worth checking out. I still feel like he's a character that gets slept on a lot as far as DC goes. I feel like ever since Jeff Johns revitalized him, he's gotten a lot more of the respect that's been due to him, and I definitely appreciate that. But still, like for me, Hawkman is a top tier DC character. He's definitely one of those that like deserves to be spoken of in the same breath of Green Lantern and the Flash and all those guys. So maybe not like the very top tier, maybe not Trinity tier, but he's definitely like the tier underneath that. He's like Green Arrow, Hawkman. These are the guys that belong in the Justice League right after the Trinity, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm really happy with this figure. He turned out really nicely. Like I said, I got a few nitpicks here and there. I do wish that he'd come with an extra hand for gripping for the left hand. I think that would have been really cool. I do think he should have come with that bladed weapon that Hawkman used a lot of the times in the 90s. That's something I just very much associate with this character in that time period. So that would have been something really cool to have. Missed opportunity as far as that goes. The biggest missed opportunity with this figure is he really should have come with a flight stand. And since I happen to have a flight stand here handy, I'm going to give you a little taste of what we should have had. And there is Hawkman on the flight stand. We can get him into a really cool flying pose. There we go. That's how he should be displayed on your shelf right there. Like if you can find a figure like on Amazon or something that's like a cheaper figure that you can buy an extra of just to get the flight stand, do it. That's going to be my plan. I'm going to, like, right after I get off of here, I'm going to look on Amazon. I'm going to see what kind of cheap superhero figure I can find with a flight stand, and I'm going to buy it just so I can give it to this guy because he definitely deserves one. Man, that looks awesome. So, and hopefully I can get that Chase version of the figure too, because I just really like that with the bright colors. That's a lot of fun. So anyway, that's pretty much it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. This might be my longest episode that I've ever done on any Mcfarlane figure, and most of it was because I was. Doesn't he look great like that? Yeah. So yeah. But most of that was talking about the history of the character, and I feel like that was something that really needed to be gone over so you could appreciate exactly where this character fits into the scheme of things. So, but I'm really happy with this one. Hopefully Mcfarlane does more figures of Hawkman in the future, because I definitely am impressed with this one. And Hawk Girl, we got to get Hawk Girl, right? You can't have Hawkman without Hawk Girl. It'd probably also make my John Stewart figure very happy. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. Anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about this figure and Hawkman in general. Hit that little bell if you want to be warned anytime that I go live and be like, oh God, it's this guy again. If you want to catch these and interact with me in the chat, like MHD did today. Thanks for stopping by. Liked having somebody to interact with. That's always fun. So, but thank you for watching. We will talk to you next time. Bye.